It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs, have some fun.
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants, from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. He is Lance Medow. Hello, Lance.
How we doing?
I am John Schmeelk. I'm doing great. The NFL draft is in the books. We actually know
really?
what the Giants...
I didn't realize that. Okay, thank you.
Yes. The 24/7 coverage has come to an end, and now
what a relief.
Always accurate and prescient draft grades are abound on the internet, which you should take very seriously. If your team got a bad draft grade, you should just give up and change franchises, because obviously judging a draft class before they even step foot in the facility for the team that they've been drafted for is the best way to determine who has a good and bad draft.
Most accurate assessment I've seen. I think the proof is in the pudding. There's overwhelming data to support your case.
It's always right. They're always right.
Without a doubt.
No question.
Yeah.
So, the New York Giants, their draft class is in the books. I've been on a bunch of different podcasts talking about this already. You can hear, go back, look at our reaction shows from Thursday night, from Friday, from Saturday. We have our FAN show that's up on the Media Pass podcast feed, right, Pearson? That's on Media Pass from Saturday morning, Sunday morning. Then draft season, the NFC review. If that's not up yet, it will be shortly. So you've heard from me a ton. You know my thoughts. I'm pretty excited. But we haven't heard from Lance at all about what the Giants did. So I'm probably going to regret this in about 2 minutes, but I'm going to pass the floor over to Lance and kind of just let it.
I'm honored.
And I'm going to let you cook here. Give me your take on what the Giants did in the draft.
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is conversations that we had on this program where we targeted specific positions, and then you look at what the Giants came out of the draft with. You're talking about a defensive tackle, which I want to focus on here because that was one of the things we discussed actually on a week ago. This Monday show where we had mentioned, that was a position you'd want the Giants to come away with, and specifically a guy that I wanted to see had some upside in terms of getting after the quarterback. Now, I know Darius Alexander's sacks are not necessarily jumping off the page, but I think his length.
He has the skill set to do it.
Correct.
No
makes
question.
him an intriguing prospect. So that was one thing that caught my eye.
And the funny thing, Lance, by the way, real quick, but before you jump off the defensive tackle, hearing Joe Schoen at the press conference, and we have a great 20-minute long interview with Joe Schoen on the YouTube channel. You guys should really go check that out. It's fantastic. Paul and I talked to him, and he was very generous with his time on Saturday after the draft. We were all a little delirious, but we got through it, and he gave us the good information. But in talking to him then and hearing him at the press conference, defensive tackle was not as big of a, I think, need for him in the front office as we maybe thought it was before the draft started. He basically said, I wasn't targeting a defensive tackle there, but he was just so high on our board we had to take him. So I think maybe they were more comfortable with the veterans they brought in free agency than maybe we were from the outside. So just something for fans to chew on as they look at that defensive tackle.
Well,
spot.
He also, during the presser, I believe after Alexander was drafted, he brought up Robertson, Harris, and Ledbetter, who they brought in.
I think they have
specifically
faith in those guys. That's correct.
Talked about those guys in conjunction with Dexter Lawrence. So, from a volume standpoint, if he didn't think it was a huge necessity, I get that. But I think there was room for a young guy. But the other thing that we pointed out was there was room for somebody that maybe is a little bit more interchangeable within the defensive line.
And
group.
he made a point. Look, it's a pass rusher, to your point, and the pass rushers go high. If you can rush the pass from the defensive tackle spot, those guys are going to get elevated in the draft. So to get him in the third round is good value.
Yeah, and the other thing that he brought up in that press conference that I'm hitting on, which was right after they selected Darius Alexander, is one of my favorite terms. Depth came up a lot. And I did not consult with Joe. He went out on his own tangent and talked about the one thing they learned from last season was the fact that when Dex went down, John, they didn't feel as if they had enough meat and potatoes on the roster. So I think that was a big target this offseason. Halfway, they targeted that and addressed that through free agency. But I think adding Alexander now gives you somebody that you could develop and somebody that, once again, that position was of note to me because I wanted to see whether or not, if God forbid somebody goes down in that group, does the level of production fall off drastically? And I still think that's a question mark with respect to this roster. So Alexander comes in, and you're talking about he's a freaky athlete is the best way to describe him. Well, if he proved in the Senior Bowl, and 4 of the 7 picks were from the Senior Bowl, which also has been a trend for the Giants if you look back over several years. They like to be able to get upfront and personal with a lot of these prospects before they commit to them. But getting back to my point is, I think he had the most to gain from the Senior Bowl by being exposed to talent from other prominent schools, and that showed a lot, not just to the Giants, but I would argue to the rest of the NFL.
And Joe Shane mentioned that to us in an interview with him.
Exactly. So you take that into consideration. I'm focusing in on him specifically because it's easy for us to talk about Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart, who were the first-round picks, but if the Giants want to make inroads, you have to get great return on the players you take from day 2 on. So that's what I'm focusing on. Then the one that I think excites me the most is Cam Scadaboo, because another conversation that we had a week ago was you asked me specifically if they target a running back, John, if you recall, what do you want? You want the bigger back for the short yardage situations, the complimentary stuff, or do you want somebody similar to Tyrone Tracy? I said I want the complimentary bigger back that helps you on the goal line, short yardage situations. Well, Scadaboo is going to help with that, but he's going to give you even more because of his ability to catch the ball.
He can do everything.
Yeah, he's a jack of all trades.
Like if
type
you
of running back.
if you wanted to bring him in and have him be your every down back,
sure. Yeah.
he could do that for sure,
without a doubt. Yeah, but I think if you still want Tyrone Tracy to piggyback off of what he did last season, which I don't see why the Giants wouldn't, Scadaboo can at least come in initially and be that bigger back that gives defensive lines something else to think about, because he packs a pretty big punch based on what he did at Arizona State. I mean, to me, the best example on the resume to show the intensity of Scadaboo is he was named Peach Bowl Offensive MVP, and the team didn't even win the game.
And they lost.
Now, I'm going to get a little historical and archival with our viewers and listeners.
Are you going Jerry West here?
That's what
Nice.
I took the term right out of my lips. And in hockey, I think maybe there is Jean-Sebastien Jaguar.
I don't know
from the Ducks.
I like your pronunciation
Yes.
with that. That
Oh,
was pretty
one of
good.
my favorite hockey players when the Ducks played the Devils in the Stanley Cup final. We have to look up what year. I'm pretty sure Jean-Sebastien Jaguar won the MVP of that series.
You really
I could be
leaned
mistaken.
into the French-Canadian there, man. That
Well,
was
I
pretty
mean,
good.
listen, you can't go wrong with a French-Canadian when it comes to hockey.
Well, that's true.
So I think I'm in safe territory. But yes, Jerry West was going to be the first example. Then I was going to go over into hockey terrain. We're an equal opportunist program here on this show, in case you have just tuned in and have not realized the rich history of Big Blue Kickoff
See,
Live. Yes.
I would have joked and asked you if Jordan ever won an MVP in a losing series, but then you would reply Jordan never lost a series,
Yeah,
and I
well,
didn't want to give you a chance to do that.
I mean,
so
that's
I
a
didn't make the
fastball down
comment.
the
I
middle.
know it is.
At least make it somewhat challenging for me.
Well, that's why I didn't do it.
No, well, that's good. Your thoughts in your head prevailed
I'm anticipating.
in hesitation. Yes. Well, you've been around me
Yes.
long enough to know
Sadly, yes.
what those easy swings of the bat are
Yes,
going to be
correct.
like. But getting back to Scadaboo, as we went off of 17 cliffs in the process, I'm not a big comparison guy, John, and I'm curious if you felt the same way. I look at the Giants' history of the pairings they've had with running backs, and what Tracy and Scadaboo can provide, to me, has the potential of what Bradshaw and Jacobs brought to the table in terms of that 1-2 punch. Remember,
I think
Jacobs
it's
was an
also-
underrated receiver.
I think it's also a little Joe Morris, O.J. Anderson.
Okay, you want to go a little
O.J.
school.
didn't
Sure.
play as much in 86, right?
Yeah.
He was a bigger factor in 90. But I think Morris and O.J. could both be full-time backs, right, and could do a little bit of everything. But they're very different.
Sure.
I think, Scadaboo is probably more of a receiver than Brandon was. Jacobs,
Brandon had
I'd say.
82 receptions. I look
Yeah.
back in his career. But there were some seasons where, remember, against the Cowboys, he
Yeah.
had that big catch and run
Look,
down the sideline.
I don't disagree with your evaluation. I'm with you on that. But I think both work because I think both guys, while they complement each other, can also do everything. And that's what it makes it, like, they're really interchangeable in a lot of ways. Like, you start a series, you can put either guy out there and
sure.
you're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine.
But Bradshaw and Jacobs were both highly utilized. Right? I mean, heck,
100%.
they had Derek
Yep.
Ward
Correct.
So
you're right about that.
Found a way to get 3 guys involved. That massive performance against the Carolina Panthers late in that 2008 season, I think, is the perfect example. So, that was what I was thinking about with respect to Scadaboo. Marcus Bowe, Joe Shane talked about this was a good value pick. He even mentioned he received calls from other front office personnel saying that they thought the Giants maximized the value. Guard was a big topic for us, and that was a position that I even pinpointed. So you look at the fact that he could play both positions. 2 of his 3 seasons in which he was a main starter was at guard, and I like that because right now you look at the roster, clearly there's room to play him at both positions, and they should. You should definitely train him to be ready to go. Right tackle was his last season, but the 2 years prior was right guard, one of which was, of course, shortened by a leg injury. That was 2023. He only played 6, but he's got 2 years where he was primarily a right guard, and I think there's more room for an impactful guard immediately and a year from now, more so than potentially at the tackle position. So I like the fact that he could be somebody that could be moved around. He even mentioned in the conversation with the media that he's been taking snaps at center to prepare himself accordingly.
And he did a little bit of the Senior Bowl, too, when he was there.
Yeah.
He's got such good feet, and the guard stuff excites me, too. I'm with you. But what gets me excited is the Giants think he can play tackle. And look, he has the feet to play tackle. I've said that since the get-go. He's just got the 33-inch arms at the Senior Bowl. He was at 32.5 at the Combine, but they basically somehow chopped off a half-inch of everyone's fingers at the Combine when they measured there. So Joe Shane thinks he can play tackle with his arm length and his athleticism. I think he has to work on his strength, some of his hand placement stuff. But look, Jermaine Illuminor's on the last year of his contract.
Yep.
You could always use good young guys that can play tackle. So you're looking at a 5-position versatile player that'll be a great backup this year. You hope to develop some of that strength, develop some of the hand placement, the fundamentals, to use that great athleticism he has to eventually become a starter at one of those spots. And if it could be if it can be offensive tackle, that's fantastic. He reminds me of Zach Tom a little bit, who went to the Packers 4 or 5 years ago, who was a tackle in college, and everyone's like, we don't think he'll play tackle in the pros. He got to move him inside, maybe center. And then he just shows up in Green Bay. They're like, no, he's tackle. And he's done a nice job for them. I think he plays right tackle for them, right, Zach Tom?
I believe so.
I believe he's on the right side.
Yeah.
So I think that's the player he reminds me of. And if he can have the type of careers that Zach Tom has had for the Packers, that is a huge – I think they were almost drafted in the same round. I think Zach Tom was probably a 5th-round pick.
It was a 4th rounder in 2022.
So close enough.
Yeah.
Right in that same area of the draft, right? So I see those two guys as being very similar. Not the biggest, but really good athletically and good feet. And look, Marcus Bowe has a lot of talent. So I love that pick. I had him as a 3rd rounder. We talked about him when we got to the mock draft at 34 at some point.
Yeah.
I think you brought up Marcus Bowe to me at that pick. So I thought that was a really, really nice pick. The same way we talked about Alexander at pick 34 too when we did our mock draft. So there's 2 guys we were talking about at 34. I always thought Bowe was more of a 3rd rounder, but to get him at the top of the 5th, or actually it was more like the middle of the 5th, that's really, really good value.
And also, by the way, speaking of players we were bringing up in that mock draft, Donovan Jackson wound up going in the 1st round.
And so did Tyler Booker. And so did Tyleik Williams.
A lot of offensive
those
linemen.
Those are the 3 guys that we are considering. And we actually had this, we did this with SciTech on Friday. And I said to him, well, Matt, let's do this over again. Let's say the Giants don't trade up for a quarterback and they just sat at 34. Who would you have picked at that spot if you had that pick at 34? And he actually said, look, it might be Darius Alexander. The Giants ended up picking him later that night, which was funny. And I said to him, honestly, and I said at the time when we did the mock, I would have had a debate with myself as to whether or not I want to use the 34th pick on a quarterback. Given all the guys that were gone at the positions we talked about that were important, I would have just picked the quarterback at 34.
Yeah.
So I think that would have been a fairly easy decision for me because Tyleik was gone, Donovan Jackson was gone, Tyler Booker was gone, Josh Connolly was gone. All those guys we had talked about at 34, I would have been more than okay picking a quarterback there. Now, like we talked about, the Giants decided that they didn't want to risk not trading up to go get him when they could at the end of the 1st round, and the price that ended up being too high. Ended up being just a pick at the end of the 3rd round and then a 3rd round pick next year. So they got that at good value. They got their player, and I think in retrospect, given what would have been there at 34, I think quarterback in the 2nd round was actually, with the 2nd round pick, which they used in the trade to move up to get Dart. Obviously, ended up being the right thing to do.
Well, last week, again, when you had asked me, Milroe came up in the conversation about who potentially they could target in the second round, but they obviously didn't need to do that, and they kept 65, which Joe Shane said was important in that trade. They gave up the compensatory pick, which was 99,
which
so
is
that was a
almost
positive.
more like a fourth rounder. It's at the very end of round 3.
And listen, we talk about this on this show multiple times. If there is conviction and that is the guy you like, then without hesitation, you go after him. There's a lot of speculation about, well, what if the Giants didn't make the trade, John? Could they have gotten Jackson Dart if they just stayed true to 34? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
It's no different than, and I don't want to revisit history, but another popular conversation that came up when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, right? It was constant. Well, what if they would have waited till later in the round? You don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what other teams would have done. We don't know if another team would have moved in front. So, again, the key operating term is conviction.
Which, by the way, if they ended up waiting till that was pick 16, right, that year to pick Daniel Jones, they wouldn't have Derek Dexter Lawrence here.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's a trade-off, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah,
right, which is funny. Now, they might have Josh Allen here, the defensive end from Jacksonville, who was also a really good player.
Sure.
But it's just funny how this stuff works when you think about it.
Yeah, and that's the guessing game that you could play for years to come. But the bottom line is there's never going to be any fact behind what the situation is. So there's no point of really wasting time and energy over things that there really will not be a conclusion to. So since you opened the door, I want to go back to the first round before we wrap up the draft class. And Abdul Carter was somebody that we projected at number 3. It was not a surprise.
It's amazing how much he's almost an afterthought.
Pretty much.
He was the 3rd overall pick, and everyone wants to talk about who they picked with the 2nd first-round pick. It's just very funny.
Yeah. Well, because I think it was predicted by a lot, and the first 3 picks pretty much went in order as many
Different
had
team.
indicated. Different team with Jacksonville
right.
coming up. But I found it interesting, by the way. Joe Shane indicated that they knew that Jacksonville and Cleveland were talking, and they were anticipating that trade was going to happen.
They seemed to know it was done, not just talking.
Well, but he mentioned he wasn't sure, though, what Jacksonville was going to do in that spot.
Correct.
He knew that they were going to switch places, but could Jacksonville have moved up to grab Abdul Carter, let's say, instead of Travis Hunter? Anything's possible. Yeah. As far as that deal, not that the Giants are losing sleep over it, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about Travis Hunter. I just feel when you move up and you don't take a quarterback, John, just a quick side note, it's going to be that much more important for Travis Hunter to contribute on both sides of the ball to justify that trade.
Steep price. I guess my question for you, and this is what the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm sure, asked themselves in that room. Would you rather have Ashton Genty, your 2nd-round pick this year, and your 1st-round pick next year, or would you rather have Travis Hunter? Because that was the trade.
Yeah.
Would they rather have Ashton Genty, pick 39, 38?
You got to look back in terms of what they gave up.
No, I think it was 36.
Was it
pick 36?
Okay.
Ashton Genty and their 1st-round pick next year, or would they rather have Travis Hunter? They took Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
That tells you how steep of a price that was.
Without a doubt. Now, on the surface right now, I would take option B, which is Genty and my 1st rounder next year.
Me too.
As it stands right now, without seeing anything that Hunter's done in the NFL, I would go with that option. And the reason being is I am extremely skeptical. I like Travis Hunter, the player. I'm skeptical, though, that he is going to be on the field on both sides of the ball as much as quickly in his NFL career by the time that rookie contract expires to say, wow, you really got an overwhelming bang for your buck. And that's why I would take Genty and the 1st-round pick the following year.
Finish up on Carter and Dart.
Yeah, so Carter, once again, we know he's going to add a tremendous amount of punch and depth to this rotational group of defensive linemen. The fact that he played linebacker as well as defensive end, he wanted to do that, I think gives them a great deal of versatility up front, which is what you want to have, because when you look at your division, and Joe Shane has talked about this, but we've had conversations about this, you don't pick players just to win NFC East games, because the extended schedule shows that you're only playing 6 games in the division versus 11 outside.
35% of your schedule.
So I don't get too caught up in that, but I look at the divisional foes as models, and the Eagles and the Cowboys have been very good at building that depth up front, even what Washington had been doing till they parted ways with a lot of those former first-round picks. So if you want to stay competitive, you need to show that you have options up front. Carter helps them with respect to that. And I do think Shane Bowen may toy with him at the linebacker position a lot. I know maybe you were not necessarily sold on that, John, but I wouldn't dismiss that because of what he showed in college. As far as Dart is concerned...
Well, I think you'll definitely see him at that spot in passing situations when they want to get all the guys on the field. I think that's when you're going to see him at inside linebacker mostly.
And I think that's going to give opposing quarterbacks and offenses something to think about at least a little.
And I guess suppose if you want to try that on early downs to get guys on the field, that's true. But I don't think you want to give too much to Carter that early. You know what I mean? But anyway.
Yeah, because defenses are much more complicated than what is thrown his way in terms of Penn State. As far as the quarterback, we had conversations about if you're going to take a quarterback later on in the draft, the chances of him becoming your guy are slim. Well, they took a quarterback with a first-round pick and they moved up. So that already sets the expectations for Jackson Dart. I still don't think there is an overwhelming emergency to get him on the field this year. In an ideal situation, Russell Wilson, regardless of what the standings showcase and the record shows, should be able to handle this season, assuming he stays healthy. So you could still utilize this season as a redshirt year for Jackson Dart. Let him consume, be a sponge, learn and watch from a true pro. And then because Russ is not on a lengthy contract, there could be a transition per se next year. But I'm looking at it right now in terms of 2025, just because they moved up to get Jackson Dart, this idea that he should see time immediately, I completely disagree with that sentiment. If there are lopsided games, John, whether it's good or bad, you want to get him in garbage time, as they call it, that's fine. But
I'm with you on
the push to put him on the field with Russell Wilson in-house, I don't think is there.
I have tried to be as clear with all the fans that have listened to our programming over the weekend as I can be. Guys, do not try to rush this guy on the field. Do not. Now, might he get here and Brian Daboll figures out, oh man, this kid's farther along than I thought. We think this is going much faster. We think we can get him on the field faster. If that's what the coach decides, you have to trust Brian Daboll that he sees stuff that we don't, right? We don't know what's going on in the practice field, Lance, once the season starts. We don't know what's going on in the meeting rooms. He's going to know that stuff, and we're not. But as a fan on the outside, if you start the year and you're 2-5 and it's like October 12th, if you call up this show and ask for Jackson Dart, I'm going to tell you the answer right now. No, he was brought in here to develop slowly. But John, the record, you have nothing to lose. No, he was brought in here to develop slowly. Develop him and nurture him. Do not let your impatience rush him onto the field before he is ready. There is ample evidence that letting quarterbacks marinate before they get onto the field can improve their flavor and their performance. I just went full in with the metaphor there with the marination.
Paul loves that.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that actually was a very Dottino-ish thing.
Warms his heart. Oh, was it ever? You just didn't use pasta. That's all that was missing.
Something tells me Dottino doesn't get very creative in terms of marinating his proteins, though. I think he likes it very plain. Yeah, I think he just throws it on the grill or pops it on.
Unless he puts some marinara sauce, perhaps, on the protein, depending on what the protein is.
You don't really marinate something in marinara sauce.
No,
That's not really
but
how
you know
that
what?
works.
But Paul may not really get a full grasp of the marination process, so he may look at it as just throw some marinara sauce on it.
Marination, marinara. It's like the same word. What?
That's where I was going with that.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you call up, we're going to say no, patience, no, take your time, let him develop at the pace he needs to develop at. And let the coaches and Brian Daboll do their thing with him. Be patient. You call up in December, that's 12 games into the year. Maybe we can have a different conversation. But don't call in September and October asking for this kid to play. They're going to get some pushback from us. I'm just telling you right now. I'm warning you ahead of time. I'm going to get annoyed at you because I'm warning you now. If you call in September and October, we're going to tell you no and to be patient. That's it.
Well, the other thing that I want to throw out that I also don't want to hear as we're piling up those items is I'm sure a lot of people, and I look back at this, so I'm going to explain that there are major differences. Brian Daboll went through this with Josh Allen in Buffalo. Okay, 2018, he was part of that big group of quarterbacks that was taken in the top 10 picks. Now, Josh Allen started in 2018, not immediately, but the biggest difference is the Buffalo quarterback depth chart had Nathan Peterman atop the depth chart. There is no comparison between Nathan Peterson's resume as well, Nathan Peterman's resume, as well as Russell Wilson.
Or Peterson, either one.
Yes, either one, even if I'm making up quarterback names. So you're bringing in a completely different example in terms of what Brian Daboll was deciding between. I know Josh Allen briefly got hurt in 2018, and they wound up bringing in another veteran quarterback under those circumstances. So it's a little bit different in terms of the options that were available in Orchard Park, New York, compared to the Giants. I don't think saying, Brian Daboll's going to tap into how he approached things with Josh Allen. No, I think it's a completely different story. If he had Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston in Buffalo, I think he probably would have taken his time. Now, granted, he wasn't the head coach, remember, Sean McDermott was, but Brian Daboll had a big say as the offensive coordinator in terms of bringing along Josh Allen and so forth.
Hey, look, and Joe Shane has talked about it many times. He does believe in a quarterback not playing right away. He believes in that. And Brian Daboll talked about putting together a development plan for the quarterback. Brian Daboll is very intentional with everything he does with these quarterbacks. You talk about like the X's and O's tests he put these guys through when they come in to visit on the pro days and stuff like that. You know, we don't know what other teams do, but my understanding is that it's one of the more complex things that any team does with these drafty quarterbacks. So, yeah, you have to trust what they're doing with them. And look, there's a reason Jackson Dart wasn't a top 10 pick, right? He's not, to quote Carl Banks, and I've done this many times over the weekend, it's not just add water starting NFL quarterback.
Yep.
It's going to take more than that. You got to mix in some ingredients. You got to get this in there. You got to get that in there to get him ready to go. So be patient. Do not rush him onto the field. He's not going to be ready right away, and that's okay. Okay? That's why he's a quarterback picked at the end of the first round, not in the top 5 picks or the top 10 picks. That's why the Giants didn't have to trade up to pick 8 or pick 9 or pick 10 or even a pick in the teens to go get him. So be patient, take your time, and try to develop him. And if you develop him and you don't have to draft another quarterback, great. If you don't get to where you want to go at the end of the year, then you figure it out what your next move is, and what you paid for him this year is not going to prohibit a future move at that position if you want to make it. So it's really that simple. Anything else on the draft, Lance, before
Well, the only other thing that I just wanted to throw out is, remember, 7th-round picks, you're picking based on character traits and potential.
And physical traits.
Correct. It's going to be hard, for them to be a lock to make the roster. You look at Thomas Fidone II, has injury history. The first 2 years of college were sidelined due to a torn ACL. He played in 23 and 24 and led the team in touchdowns in 23. But I think that the lack of mileage on his body as a result of the injury is a positive. Yeah. But, we'll see what he can carve out in terms of creating a role. And it
hasn't seemed to suck his athleticism, by the way.
No, it hasn't.
He tested really well at the combine.
Good.
But more importantly, if you watch him play, he looks fast on the field. So you saw the speed on tape, and then it checked out when they did the testing at the combine. So it doesn't look like that knee injury has sucked away any of his athleticism.
No, and he's 2 years removed from it too, John. So
he's played 2 full seasons.
Correct. That helps. Corey Black has tremendous speed. I like the fact that he has a little special teams experience
and
as
good size too.
Punt coverage.
6 foot, 200
good size too. Yeah, 6-footer who can run 4.3. I mean, that certainly jumps off the page. And once again, they've got a number of corners who, from previous draft classes, who they brought in via free agency. He'll go out, he'll compete, and he'll also, like Fidone, try to carve out a role. I think the 2 things that once again jump out about these players is you like the athleticism and what they could perhaps bring to those respective positions. But I think special teams, John, is the key operating phrase. Maybe for Black more so than Fidone. They've got to show something in that area if they want to solidify a position.
Yeah, for both of them. No, I'm with you 100%. But I think Fidone, in terms of physical ability, like he could be a number 2 tight end in this league just by the way he plays in his athleticism. And Nebraska, Matt Rule, he makes those guys block too. So
former NFL coach.
It's a very physical game. So I think just things to keep an eye on.
And he said he's a physical player when he was asked by the media. That was the first thing that he pointed out.
He tattooed himself. He's got to be pretty tough.
Yeah, 12 or 13 tattoos, and one of them he did himself.
Yes.
Yeah. No word yet whether the Giants logo is going on the body. That is
Paul
up for debate at this point.
Very excited they brought in a Paisan, by the way.
I can only imagine.
Very excited.
Well, I mean, does it really matter? I think any time a guy puts on a Giants uniform, Paul's excited.
He gets extra.
You could bring in Joe Schmo off the street, and Paul will get excited.
The only thing better than a guy wearing a Giant uniform is a guy wearing a Giant uniform. They put the little Italian flag on one of the arms.
Oh, okay.
That gets him even more excited.
No. Marinara sauce, tattoos. We covered all.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
All right, let's get to the calls. 201-939-4513. Just a reminder, I mentioned it before. Our interview with Joe Shane, Giants YouTube channel, is also open. The Giants Huddle podcast. Check that out. You can find that Giants app, giants.com/podcast. Search for Giants Huddle. Draft season, if it's not up yet, it will be shortly. Tony, Pauline, and I, we split. We just went a long time, folks. So we split AFC, NFC. NFC is the first one. That's going up today, and then AFC's number 2. That'll probably go up tomorrow. We want to get those up as quickly as possible because we don't want to let the draft review stuff hang for too long. And then I'm working on some other guests to review what the Giants did on the draft for this week and next, leading up to rookie minicamp, which is in about 12 days, right? It's not this Friday, it's the following Friday, Pearson, when they show up, right? So make sure you go check that out. All right, let's go to Abdul in Minneapolis. He will lead us off. Hi, Abdul. How are you, buddy? Did we just lose Abdul? Abdul, call back. We will get Abdul. You there? I think we just lost Abdul. Abdul, call back. We will get you right up. All right, pal. Don't worry about it. All right, let's go back to the calls and say hi to Ron in New Jersey. Ron, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good, guys. Long time no talk.
What's up, man?
Quick technical question on the draft, and one about Carter.
Okay.
But I feel strongly about what I want to say now. I went to the draft party. I'm a long-time season ticket holder. 5:30 to 7:30, I had to leave. World-class customer service. Everyone in the place was courteous. I had 3 guests with me. They said the same thing, and I want you guys to be the ones to pass it along to the powers that be. Even the parking lot guys were good, and you know what I mean by that. That's a surprise. But honest to God, it just made us all feel welcome and part of the family. So real good job.
Ron, that's great. You know, we used to have Lance in charge of the customer service over there, and Lance can get a little ornery.
Sure.
So we made sure we removed him out of the process, and we're happy the people we put in there instead of Lance have really done a much better job.
Yeah.
Good,
Better
good.
training
All right, one
as a
little
result.
thing that bothered me. You know how the first 3 teams switched in rounds 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, they always do that. Yep.
They've always done that?
Yeah, they have.
I just
Usually
missed
when
that
teams
thing.
have the
Okay.
same record, well, you know, when I say always, I think maybe in like the last 5 years. So what they do, if teams finish with the same record, right, they look at the strength of the opponent's schedule. The team that has the toughest opponent's schedule gets to pick first of the 3 teams. But in order to try to even it out a little bit, they will then rotate those teams each round. So it was...
Okay, I liked it.
Yeah, so it was this year, I guess what it was, Browns, Giants, Patriots, right? And no, I'm sorry,
Right,
it was
Giants had the first
I'm sorry,
pick
it
in the
was
third
Titans,
round.
Browns, Giants.
Yeah.
The next round it was Browns, Giants, Titans, and then the final round it was Giants, Titans, Browns in round 3, and then it resets in round 4 and goes through the cycle all
Right.
over again. Right.
Got it. All right, so I love the draft, by the way. I am thrilled. First time in years, I'm thrilled. Abdul Carter, I should know the answer to this, but some have said he can play off-ball linebacker. Remind me what off-ball linebacker is, and will he cover tight ends and running backs?
Well,
I was under the impression he was just one after the quarterback.
Well, that's what he did primarily, Ron, in his final and third year at Penn State. He changed positions. He became basically a defensive end for Penn State in his final year, and that's what he became. He was a pass rusher. But his first 2 years, he played off-ball linebacker, so he played middle linebacker.
What do you mean by off-ball?
Off-ball, that means basically like a guy not lining up on the line of scrimmage. So when you say somebody lines up on the ball, you know, you're one of the guys either with their hands in the dirt on the line of scrimmage or standing up outside one of the defensive ends or tackles. That's an on-ball player. Off-ball players are your corners, your linebackers, your safeties. They play off of the line of scrimmage, which means you're playing in space more, right? You're not just putting your head down is the wrong way to put it, but you're not just trying to get upfield. You're reading and reacting to what the offense is doing. To your point, you could drop into zone, you can cover tight ends, you can cover running backs, and yes, he did do that his first 2 years. In fact, Ron, that was one of the questions I asked. That was my first question for Joe Shane in our interview with him. And I said, Joe, how did the fact that you got to watch him as an off-ball player help your evaluation with him as an edge player, which is what he's probably going to play mostly here? And he said, look, you see his instincts. You can see that he does have a feel for space. He has a feel for the game. You can see him run sideline to sideline more, which is stuff that he did as an inside linebacker or off-ball linebacker, however you want to look at it. And then you can see that complement the upfield pass rushing skills he had as his third year as a defensive end.
Off-ball also
get him on
indicates
the
less
field
traffic, too, that you're going to be working with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that to get him on the field more? Or because don't these guys need rotation? Defensive linemen don't play 100% of the snaps.
No, they don't. And Ron, Thanks for the call. I
Thank
think
you, guys.
no, appreciate it, man. Good stuff. And thank you for the kind words. I will certainly pass it on to the people upstairs. In fact, Pearson, let's clip that call. We can send it upstairs to the folks. I think they'll be happy to hear Ron's good experience at the draft party. They had Micah Parsons. That's why he was an off-ball linebacker his first 2 years.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. They had Micah Parsons, and the Penn State has always had a bunch of they Chop Robinson, right? You had all those.
Chop
guys.
Robinson is the main reason
Correct.
I think why Abdul Carter played off.
Did
ball.
Carter and Parsons overlap 1 year? Or maybe not even 1 year, actually. You might be right about that.
Yeah.
But it was Chop Robinson.
It was Chop, yeah.
Odafe Owe maybe for a year. Maybe he was there his freshman year, maybe.
May have
Did
crossed
they
paths.
overlap
I can
1
look
year,
that up.
maybe?
Yeah.
But they bottom line, they have a lot of really good pass rushers on the edge there. And it's probably hard to find space there for him, right? So they played him off ball to start, and then they moved him to the edge. In fact, it was him. He was the one that requested moving to defensive end to make the most of his skills. So I think that kind of worked out for everybody.
Yeah, I'm looking up. Oh, let's see. Owe was drafted in 2021.
No, so they would not have
So they
overlapped.
did not
no.
cross paths there.
So it's Chop
Yeah.
Robinson, and then there's somebody in between Chop Robinson and Owe that I cannot remember. There's somebody else in there, and I don't remember the player's name, but there's another guy.
I'm
going
to bring up the Penn State roster. Yeah.
In the meanwhile, Abdul in Minneapolis did call back. Abdul, sorry about that, man. What's going on?
No worries. It's gonna be kind of cool hearing my name being said for the next few years on TV. By the way,
I'm sure you're gonna love it.
Yeah. That being said, this off season and especially the last 3 days has been a well needed injection of positivity to the organization and the fan base. After this past 12 months, starting with the Hard Knocks interview, and then Saquon going to the Eagles, winning for 2,000 yards, and the whole season in general. This fan base and organization kind of hit a low spot, and the last 3 days has completely changed the direction of everything. The perception has gone 180, and it's been well needed. As a fan, I was at a low point. I barely listened to Giants radio, and then as of Sunday, I'm back on. I'm reading the articles, the podcast. I'm calling you guys back. It's been a really needed jolt of positivity.
That's great.
That being said,
yes,
the one thing that I'm still concerned with is the defensive coordinator. My main concern is under his tutelage or under his watch, a lot of key players kind of regressed. The linebacker, Okereke, and the cornerback Banks, they kind of regressed. And to kind of borrow from Bill Parcells' kind of analogy about cooking and T-dots, polydots, so Sean Gott has gotten the defensive coordinator a lot of good ingredients to make a great meal, right? So as of right now, I'm not sure if he's going to be a line cook from Denny's or head chef from La Bernadette. He has all the ingredients there, right? The Giants have loaded up the shelves.
Yeah, look, Abdul, you're right. They have added a lot to the defense this offseason. A lot. So you're right about that.
As I'm not gonna rush to judgment. They picked this guy, and I trust the head office, now especially that they think this guy has the goods to make this defense as potent as it can be. I didn't see it last year, so I hope last year that the shelves. To continue with the analogy, the shells are more bare. But now that he's fully stacked, I really hope that he does what he makes this defense what it really can be. And I'm really psyched to be back engaged with the Giants because I love this team. I've been a fan since '86, and the past year has been kind of rough. So I'm back in, guys, and I'll listen to you guys much more.
Nice, good to have you back, Abdul. We appreciate that. And look, guys, I mean, the defense wasn't good enough last year. John Maris said it in his postseason press conference. He was tired of watching teams run up and down the field on them. And Joe Shane and I'm not sure if Dave will mention it, but when they were up the podium together, they talked about, this pass rush stuff on the defensive line is great to have all these pass rushers in the game. Well, guess what? In order for that pass rush to work, Lance, and we saw this in the second half of last year, the pass rush becomes much less effective when you're never playing with a lead and the other team can run the ball whenever they want.
Yeah, you got to start with stopping the run. I mean, that's the bread and butter of any defense that has a really good pass rush. Why? Because you're forcing them to third and longs and maybe even second and longs, John. See, pass rushing situations and the ability to get after the quarterback is dictated by down and distance.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to. If you're giving them gaping holes on the ground and you're telling the guys, go after the quarterback and it's 2nd and 3, well, the offense can run the football. quarterback's not going to be dropping back under those circumstances.
Yeah, and guess what? The other team's just going to run play action. And it's much harder to rush the passer against play action.
Yeah.
And they can keep running play action because have a lead. They're good down in distances. And you have to worry about the run because you can't stop it. So you hope that this combination of guys they've brought in will stop the run. The offense can score just a few more points, please, where you get some more leads, and then the pass rush can really get off. Remember, when the Giants, look, they started the year 2-3, 2-4 last year. What was it? Whichever one it was. They were playing close games to start the year. Yeah. So they were in these games, so it gave the pass rush a chance to do really well. Later in the year, they started getting some of those big deficits. They got down big in a lot of these games, Lance, and then it became much more difficult because of the type of game flow that we were talking about.
Yeah, well, 1-3 to start the season. Yeah. Minnesota, Washington,
1-3
Dallas,
and 2-4. 1-3 and 2-4, yes.
Yeah. Well, you're right. They did win the second game after the Dallas game, so they did go to 2-3.
Oh, so they were 2-3. Okay,
so,
perfect. Yes.
Yeah. I was just looking at the first quarter.
Yeah.
Before. But, well, to your point, what I was going to emphasize here is we could sit here and get all excited over names on a roster, which doesn't mean much of anything. I think Joe Shane even pointed this out because it's all about, how you utilize that talent, whether or not the talent can stay on the field. And the other thing that's important is we're focusing on the defense here. And this is what you were alluding to. The offense, how productive that side of the ball is actually going to tell an awful lot about how productive the defense is going to be this season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? See, meaning you can't analyze any football team, specifically the Giants, where you say, the Giants added all this personnel, so the defense is going to skyrocket up the rankings. Yeah, that sounds great. But if the offense does not manufacture better production and puts the defense out on the field where they have to now go above the X's and O's to have these game-changing plays.
How many possessions?
It changes things drastically.
How many possessions are the defense on the field for?
Yeah.
That's a big deal, right? Is the offense productive enough where they're only out there for 7 or 8 possessions? Or does the offense keep going 3 and out and they're on the field for 12? It could be that big of a difference depending on the flow of the game. So, Lance, you're absolutely right. 100% agree with you. All right, let's go to Brandon in New Jersey. He's up next on Big Blue.
And Brandon, before you respond, I looked it up. It's Adisa Isaac, who was the other Penn State pass rusher who was Baltimore. That was the other guy that was in front of Abdul Qadir.
He also went to Baltimore.
He went to the Ravens, in 2024.
All right, Brandon, what do you got?
All right, so I got 2 things. One is a point of clarification of something I had called before the draft.
Sure.
And then it does tie into my second thing, which is more or less a concern with the organization and kind of where they're at, and basically based on their history. So the first thing is a point of clarification. At the end of the call last time, I said something that was a little jarring, but I can give further context, which is that I think Phil Rivers was the greatest, and I want to underline the word greatest, choke artist there at quarterback. And I'm going to give you another example so it's not as jarring, but this player still is in the league, so I didn't want to use him as an example, but Dak Prescott also fits in this category. And essentially what I was trying to get to was during the regular season, these are all pro top 10 quarterbacks. But as soon as you get into the postseason, when in the postseason, at some point, it may not be every game, but multiple games, it is necessary for your quarterback to not only play to their normal standard, but they're going to have to up that level of play in order to continue to the next round to some degree somewhere. It's not that Phil Rivers is a bad quarterback. It's just that during the regular season, Dak Prescott, during the regular season, this is an amazing quarterback. But when his team needs him the most in order to continue when it's win or go home, they tend not to show up. And that was really what I was getting
Brandon,
to.
I totally get where you're coming from. I think some of that has to do with what's going on around those quarterbacks in those spots too. But let's not waste time on that debate now. What's your major point you want to make on the draft class?
All right. So my issue with Jackson Dart, and if you know, I was calling before they drafted him.
No, you did.
Which was my issue. My red flag with Jackson Dart was that in his college career, he never was able to elevate whenever there was pressure. And not pressure as far as pressure in the pocket. I mean pressure to get down the field. We're down to score, and we got a minute and some change. We got to get down. There was none of that. There was none of that necessary. That he's never showed a ability to extend or make sure his team down the field. And in the NFL, where you have most games are decided by one score. Again, what I was saying was after the 2-minute warning is where you're going to make your money.
Well,
and I
real
need
quick,
to see those amazing throws from the first quarter at the 2-minute warning as well.
Brandon, I understand what you're saying. Go back, watch the LSU game September 30th, 2023. They won 50. They won.
I think I watched them.
They won 55-49 in that game. Jackson Dart was 26-39 for 389 yards, 4 touchdowns and no picks, and his team scored 55 points against a Jaden Daniels-led LSU team.
Oh, his junior year. All right.
Yep.
Well, I have to go back and look at further into his junior year.
Yep.
But I mostly focus. I did look at the end of his junior year, and I'm mostly focused on his senior year because that's really the player you're bringing into the building, not the junior.
No, I got you.
And in his senior year, there wasn't much of that. And this is what my overall concern is. This organization has not shown the willingness to be honest with what they're looking at and move on before it gets too long. I think Jackson Dart is going to be very good, especially in that first 15 of plays. I think that's where he really shines. Is right. He's got his game plan. He knows what he's doing. He's going to go. I think he's much better than the last quarterback. So I don't want to make it sound like I think he's a terrible quarterback out the gate. But I do believe that his ceiling will lock him into one of the Dak Prescott of the world, where you're going to end up paying the guy a lot of money. But do we, any of us, truthfully think that Dak Prescott is ever going to an NFC Championship, let alone a Super Bowl, just based on his history?
I mean, look,
I think most people would say no.
I think it's not hard for me to imagine him getting his team to an NFC title game. That isn't hard for me to imagine, to be honest with you. And look, I think we have to see. We have to see how he does, Brandon. I understand your concern. You're right. This past year, there were not a lot of close late wins for Ole Miss. You're not wrong about that. I don't disagree with you. That's fair. But I think you have to see how it develops here. And, you make the point that they hold on to guys too long. Remember, Joe Shane and Brian Dable specifically, they did not pick up Daniel Jones as fifth-year option. They were more than ready to move on from him until they had the miracle 2022 season, in which case, after you win a playoff game, you're not just going to dump your young starting quarterback into the nether after you win a playoff game. So I think this group is pretty realistic. I mean, they haven't after 2 years, did they force feed Evan Neal into the starting lineup last year?
Injuries, but otherwise I think they would have. If he wasn't injured to start the year, I think they would have, which is kind of where I'm at.
They went out there. Hold on, Brandon, hold on. They went out there and signed Jermaine Illuminor and talked about him as their starting right tackle in the offseason last year.
I thought they were wanting him to go to right guard. I think it was Runyon was going to be left guard.
It was a competition.
Illuminor was slated to be right guard until Neal got hurt. That's how that actually went.
It was going to be a competition. Evan Neal they said he was not going to be given the starting right tackle job. It was going to be a competition. That's what it was going to be.
And they also had Greg Van Roten too, so there were options there. It wasn't a lock, I think, for
now. Van Roten wasn't brought back in though until after Neal had his setback or whatever.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm looking at it more towards the beginning of the season as opposed to maybe the conversations that were happening in April or May.
Fair enough. And Brandon, let me put it this way: have they forced Jalen Hyde into the starting lineup?
No.
There you go.
But he's not a first rounder either. That's not where they tend to do this at. They tend to do this at whoever's. It's not just quarterback specific, obviously. Whoever's picked in the first round. And I get that because of the cost of that.
Every team does that, Brandon.
They want to give that player as many opportunities as possible.
And Brandon,
I totally
every team does that. Every team does that.
To me, I feel like the organization does not say, okay, regardless of where we selected this player, for this position, here's our standard. And if I drafted you in the first round and you're well below this standard or you're not meeting the standard, instead of just, like the Steelers, instead of just saying, all right, that's not going to work and move on and then worry about the tabloids on the back end, they tend to give that person chance after chance after chance
Brandon,
after chance.
I think that is a fair criticism of things that happened here from like 2013 to 2018. I think you had guys hang around on rookie contracts even though they did not produce. I think at times during that period, that is a fair criticism. I'm not convinced that this particular regime should inherit the sins of what happened back then. I don't think I've seen the evidence from this group that that's still a problem. Do you think that's fair?
I'll say the jury's out. That's what I'll say.
Okay, and
there.
that's fine. Yeah, because honestly, they haven't been here long enough. Their first draft class is just hitting their 4th year, so it's hard to kind of tell.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, and
Not
also,
fair.
Like Eric Gray's still on the roster, isn't he? Like that's kind of where I'm at.
Is who?
Still. Like,
Eric Gray. Yeah, Eric Gray.
Could have been moved on, but we're still there with them.
Well, but I mean,
and
I don't
like it's more of the same to me.
I mean, well, but going into his 3rd year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Eric Gray's a great example, Brandon. To your point, I mean, also my counter to that would be, what type of a burden is Eric Gray doing to the roster right now? Who are you depriving?
He's a roster slot. But for me, he's just a roster slot, and I would call in the offseason last year and said I had my bold prediction somewhere on the board that Eric Gray would actually be cut because his rookie year he looked very small. And this is from at home. He looked very small. He had a good little amount of burst at times, but whenever he was given the ball repeatedly through a little bit of a stint of a time, it really wasn't much production on the back end, and he's a later round pick. And then you go into year 2 with him, and it's like, okay, well, now he's barely getting touches, and then when you're looking at your year 3, and it's like, are we going to move on from this player? Because it's not that he's bad. He's just not, set the standard. You're not meeting it, move on.
No, Brandon,
they don't do that.
No, I understand, but this is going to be year 3.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't finalized the roster yet.
And they just drafted a running back. So what does that tell you? Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll see. And as I said, jury is still out. That's my point. Jury is still out. But ultimately, if I'm calling back in 2 years going, hey, Chief, this ain't it. We haven't made a comeback win yet. Every time we're down 3, that means we lose the game.
Brandon, I'm not saying
that's what we're doing in 2 years. We might be 8 years like that. Based on their history. And that's what I'm saying.
No, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, where I disagree with his assessment about the quarterback, and I'll bring back the whole Phillip Rivers and Dak Prescott, and Rivers and Dak Prescott helped their teams get to the playoffs quite consistently.
And the second round of the playoffs.
That, to me, holds value. Yeah. See, the problem I have with his litmus test is he's going Super Bowl, NFC Championship game or bust. And that's not how you should be evaluating quarterbacks. The Giants right now are trying to get to the playoffs and see if they could do that consistently. If your quarterback helps you accomplish that, then I think you've done well. You're raising the bar so far beyond the Giants. It's a baby step. It's winning record, competing for the division title. How about they get there first before you start making these declarations? But I think your assessment of Phillip Rivers and Dak Prescott is off point based on what those two did, and Dak is still playing consistently in the regular season and helping position their teams to get to the playoffs. If you draft a quarterback and develop a quarterback, John, that keeps you in the conversation on an annual basis, I think that is a fulfilling draft pick. This idea that you have to get to 7 NFC Championship games and win a Super Bowl, name me all the guys that have done that.
Especially if you're using a pick at the bottom of the first round for it. It's one thing if you're picking him second overall.
Well, but Dak was a 4th round pick.
No. But I'm referencing back to Jackson Dart here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If you use the second overall pick in the draft and you don't take an Abdul Carter or you don't take a Travis Hunter to take a quarterback, and that quarterback's, because of his physical traits, is never going to be capable of taking you to where you need to go, I get that argument. I've made that argument. I understand that argument. But when you're picking a quarterback at 25, when pretty much all the first-round grades in this class are going to be off the board and already taken, then I think it's a different conversation. And Dart has good traits. He can run. He's tough. He's got a good, maybe not elite, but good arm. He's big enough. He's thick. He has escapability. So his traits are good. They're not great. Well, he wasn't picked in the top 5. He was picked at 24, right? So you have to look at it
in terms of the level of expectation.
Measure it that way, correct?
Yeah.
And again, look at the other guys that would have been available at pick 34. And to his point, I mean, we're on year 4 of this regime's first draft class. I don't think we can start saying, they're holding on to guys too long. I don't buy that.
Well, but then the counter to that is you'd be wasting picks, John, if you bail on players also that quickly too.
Now, if a guy is not good enough, I don't want to keep him around just for the sake of keeping him around either.
But I'm talking about if you draft a guy, I'm going to go back to the Eric Gray example. That to me is not the hill to climb with this point.
No,
Eric Gray has played 2 years in the National Football League. He's now entering year 3. He'll have additional competition at the running back position. And if he doesn't make the roster, then you would say, okay, you had 2 years to evaluate him and you decided to move on. Or even if he does make the roster, you can't grade a draft class until 3 to 4 years pass by. Now you want to create a draft class a year and a half into a player's career. That to me is impractical.
All right, let's go to...
And I would hold that true for any team. I'm not just talking about the Giants, by the way. I'm talking about that applies across the board.
Let's go to Charlie in Portland, Maine. Hi, Charlie. I haven't heard from you since the draft ended or started, for that matter. What do you got, pal?
Well, because I was waiting until this fiasco was over with. I give it a C. And
I'm sure Joe Shane's
John,
crushed.
We made
He'll
a
be in
big
the fetal
mistake
position
on the
for the next 3
quarterback.
weeks.
We made a big mistake on the quarterback. And I don't care what you say. If you waste draft picks to move up to get a guy in the first round, then he better start playing right away. At least there should be competition between Rusty Wilson and Winsome and Dot Beta.
That's not what it is, Charlie. That's not what it is.
And
I'm just telling you, you can yell and scream about it, and if you keep calling and yelling and screaming about it, Charlie, I'm not going to put you on.
No, but
because that's the situation here. They told us at the introductory press conference, it's not a competition. He's here to develop, and Russell Wilson is the starter. So bring that into... let me ask you something. Is Patrick Mahomes a franchise quarterback?
Yeah.
When Patrick Mahomes got drafted by the Chiefs behind Alex Smith, was that a competition for the starting job?
He played one game, the last game.
No,
of the regular season.
but it wasn't. Oh, wait. Do you know better than Andy? Wait, no, time out.
This is a different situation.
Do you know better than Andy Reid how to develop quarterbacks, Charlie? Do you know better than Andy Reid how to develop quarterbacks?
Look, I'm telling you something right now, and I don't care if you have me ever on your show again. He is supposed
Can
to
I write
be
that down?
a
He just said he doesn't care if we ever have him on the show again.
He's a franchise quarterback. That's why you moved up and gave up draft
You're
picks.
trying
And
to
if you
develop
don't have
into
compete
a
with
franchise.
Rusty Wilson played terrible his last 4 games. You can't just anoint him the starter. This needs to be a competition. He made a big mistake. And if he had just picked him at 24 or 25 when we did, and we didn't have to give up any compensation for him, then I would say you're right, but you're not.
Charlie, they traded basically a pick at the top of the 4th round and a 3rd round pick next year. This was not huge compensation in the trade.
And they lost second round pick. If you should have just taken him at 3. If you really wanted Dart, you should have taken him at 3.
That's an asinine argument, Charlie. That doesn't make any sense.
What, to justify playing
Listen,
him
you don't have Abdul Carter.
Yeah, you know who's better than Abdul Carter? Green. Green is going to be a better pass rusher than that guy.
Goodbye.
I
can't do it.
Well,
I can't do it.
The problem
I
with...
can't do it.
Well,
the day after the draft,
don't even
I can't
attempt
do that.
doing it. Don't even attempt doing
that.
it.
The idea that you can't develop a quarterback and if he's picked 24th in the 1st round, where was Jordan Love drafted?
No, Jordan Love was a late 1st round pick and then sat and now took over. Yeah, but see, that's the problem with Charlie's points are always generic. He doesn't give examples. That's why it's hard to put any credibility behind what he's saying. He just speaks in generalities.
And
there is no
Abdul
rule
Carter
of thumb.
stinks. Abdul Carter stinks now. Seriously, this is what we're doing the day after the Giants draft is over. Abdul Carter's a bad pick. Every single person that we evaluated the draft that said he was a top 2 player in this class, they're all wrong. Every single draft analyst I had on the Giants Huddle podcast for 2 months, Pearson, tell me I'm wrong. He was a top 2 player for every single person. It was unanimous. This stuff is never unanimous. It was unanimous. But no, Charlie knows better. This isn't me saying it. It's not my opinion. I'm going off consensus. And if you look at the consensus of what everyone says, no one's saying that Jackson Dart is a ready-made, come in and start right away quarterback. No one made that argument. The Giants, who picked him, did not make that argument. When they go out of their way at the first press conference after they make the pick and they say, no, he's not starting right away, they have a plan for the player. You might not like the plan, Charlie, and that's fine. You might not like the plan, and that's fine. That's your opinion. It's not reality. So if you want to live in your non-reality world and get mad about it, that's fine. If my suggestion to you, and you can always call back, Charlie, you know that. But I warned you before the show. If you're going to call up in October and ask me about this, I was going to get mad. So you decided I'm going to try to push the envelope and call up in April and ask about it.
As if he's not going to take advantage of that. Come on.
Guess what? I got mad. I warned you. I told you it was going to happen. You pushed the button. You tempted the bear. And I went after him. Okay? That's the reality. So I suggest if you want to be a little bit happy over the next few months, which probably is not the case. I think Charlie likes
Wishful
being upset
thinking.
about things.
Yeah.
Just accept that reality. That's the reality. Okay? This is Russell Wilson's starting job. Now, is there a chance, I'm not going to rule it out, that Jackson Dart comes in and he's some prodigy that learns the offense in 3 weeks and is some, wonderkind rookie quarterback? Could this all go faster than we all think? Is it impossible? No. We've all seen weird things happen, Lance. Dak Prescott ended up starting his rookie years in Dallas
2 guys ahead of him got hurt.
When they had a Pro Bowler and Tony Romo. Weird things happen in this league. It's just the way it goes. But the plan is what the plan is because of where the prospect is when you picked him. And picking a player at 24th overall in a draft where there's 12 to 15 first-round picks, do you know what that means, Lance? You're probably picking a second-round player, even though he's actually selected in the first round. He's graded like a second-round player. But in order to make sure you get the player because you really like him, and I don't know where, maybe he was a first-round player at the Giants board. I don't know where they had him graded. You have to move up, especially at the quarterback, if you like the player, to go when you get him. You're transferring your opinion of what a first-round pick means onto what the Giants' intentions were and what their opinion of a player is and what it means to pick a player in a certain slot. Just because you view that differently than them, don't put your expectations on a player the Giants drafted when they might see those expectations completely differently. If that's going to get you upset and that's going to get you mad, Charlie, then I hate to tell you this, you're going to be mad and you're going to be upset. That's just the way it's going to be. And I can't help you. I can't help you there. I can't help you.
There's no rule of thumb when it comes to the NFL in terms of just because you take a quarterback in the first round that he has to start immediately, or that you paint him or think he's a franchise quarterback and he has to start immediately.
And by the way,
that's Charlie's idea.
And I said the same thing about Shedeur Sanders. I said he would take time to figure things out. I said the same thing about Jalen Milroe, which would take even more time to figure out. The only guy, I thought the guy that was closest to playing right away was Tyler Shook. But he's 25, and he's had a bajillion injuries. So I understand why you wouldn't want to go down that road, even though we played really well last year. I get all that. But, come on, man. Don't be mad for the sake of being mad. Can you have some optimism for a freaking day? For a day!
There are guys that were drafted in the first round that got opportunities because of injuries. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. Baker Mayfield sat behind Tyrod Taylor to start 2018. Baker was the first overall pick. The only reason why he got on the field was Taylor got hurt 2 or 3 games into the season. So I could give you plenty of examples, but I think when you take your time with a quarterback, especially if he is drafted in the first round, the chances of it panning out, I think, do improve. It's not a lock, but when you have a veteran quarterback, this idea that he should come in and he should compete immediately and have a legitimate shot to take away the job of the polished veteran, why, just so you can evaluate him immediately? I mean, you could say the benefit of the Giants moving up in the first round is they got the 5th-year option. So they actually do have a little bit more wiggle room to evaluate him as opposed to, think about this, if Dart was taken in the second round where they stayed put, they would have had 1 less year on the contract.
That's the other bonus of trading up. You get the 5th-year option. That's correct. And look, Bill Polian came on the show with Lance and I 2 weeks ago to the day. And what did he say about rookie quarterbacks, Lance? No rookie quarterback is ready to play right away.
Yeah.
That was his quote. Because I asked him that question, would you rather target somebody in the second round that maybe has to develop more or might be more ready? And he goes, no one's ready the first year. No one is.
Because it's so complex in NFL offense. I don't think the average individual does not realize how much of a jump up it is, regardless of what you ran. Even if you ran a pro-style college offense, it is a completely different animal. Correct. In the National Football League.
And yes, absolutely. All right, Len in Columbia, Maryland will inject some optimism on the way out the door here. Hi, Len.
I am going to be optimistic. I'm going to be positive.
And now, Len, I feel bad now because I think Charlie tried to do what he did to me. He tried.
I mean, it's so entertaining, John.
You took the bait.
I know it annoys you sometimes.
I know, but Len, I let him push my button. And that's what he wanted to do, and I let him do it. And now I'm annoyed at myself because I let him get me annoyed. Charlie, I love you, but man, you...
Okay.
See, it goes in one ear and out the other when it comes to Charlie.
Follow Charlie. You know, I want to go back to Brandon's take for just a second. Something I couldn't tell. He gave us something to think about, and actually, I had it on my mind because I heard his call last week.
No, it's a good call.
When he brought it up. When he brought it up. So, I mean, it's a very good point. You know, all you got to do is to think of, you know, what Ernie Accorsi said about drafting Eli Manning, why he wanted Eli Manning, and it's the same thing. He said every time I saw Eli, he was bringing the team back. So it is. He does have a valid point. But the one thing I couldn't tell, did he like the trade or not?
Who, Charlie or Brendan?
No, Brandon.
I don't believe he thinks that Dart can be a quarterback that can lead you to the Super Bowl. So my thought is that he was not a fan of the move.
Wow, my thinking. I like the trade, by the way. My thinking is we had to come out of this with a young quarterback. We just had to come out of it whether it was a mandate from above or just Joe thinking. I mean, this is what we've been talking about from January: bridge quarterback and bring in a young quarterback. You might as well go early and get the better ones. I mean, you know, he was talked about as what did we call him? The third best quarterback, maybe the fourth best quarterback in the draft.
Well, I mean, Glenn, going up to it,
he was showing some good stuff, and people like talking to him. I like the trade. I like the trade. Now, but I tell you, I have to admit, and in fact, I like the whole draft. Arguably, I think we had the best draft in the league. Arguably, you could argue it.
Sure.
The only thing that concerns me, and John, I didn't hear your analysis of how the rest of the division went. But my concern is the rest of the division did pretty good also.
Yes, Len, I agree. I think all three NFC East teams actually did really good. I thought the Eagles had a good draft again. Well, Dallas, I thought their first three picks were good, and I thought Washington did well.
Yeah. The NFC East did the best of all the divisions.
Yeah, I also think the AFC West did pretty good. I think the Chiefs had a phenomenal draft. I loved every player they took. But, yeah, I'm with you. I thought the NFC East unfortunately, did very well.
Well, and see, that's the thing about the division.
Now, the only thing, it's kind of funny, and I know we're going to feel this way next year, too.
Yeah.
You know, when it got to pick 99, I thought to myself, oh, my God, I wish we had 99 because my guy Felton was sitting there. I really wanted, as you know, Felton in the draft.
I'm with you.
And I can just imagine next year when we've got the 76th pick in the draft, you know, the 12th pick, 13th pick in the third round, we're going to be sitting there and saying, oh, my God, look at all these good football players, and we can't get one of them. I think that's just a natural thing. But I just think they needed to do it. We had to get a young quarterback, somebody with some promise, you know, potential, seems like a likable guy.
Yep.
I like everything about it. I thought the draft was terrific. And as you know, I called on Friday night, John. I think I was the last call on Friday night. Alexander, wow. Do you think he's a potential 3-down player?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I do. Yeah, I do too. I do too. I wouldn't be disappointed if he stayed on the field. I'll tell you, that's just when you talk about, for me anyway, and I'm going old school now. When you talk about a 3-4 defense and the 3-down linemen up front, he's got perfect size. Oh my!
He's got length.
6'4", 305.
Well,
I mean, that's
Len, I will say this: when you draft a guy where you drafted him, he better play all 3 downs, or he better have the potential to play all 3 downs.
Okay. Yeah. No, I wouldn't mind that. I'm big on that. And outside of Carter, that was probably my favorite pick. You know, Scatterbo, he's going to be a fan favorite. I mean, people are going to love him.
Yeah, they are.
You know, I hope he lasts. That running style. You know, he's got some violence behind his run, but you know, linebackers are taught to be violent at impact.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I mean, look, he ran for over 1,700 yards. I think, though,
we got to run, man. Thanks for the call, man.
What will help him?
You can call back later in the week if you didn't get everything. That's
what will help Scatterbo, I think, is the fact that if he doesn't come in and have a heavy workload, and the Giants do have Tyrone Tracy, you're not adding an immense amount of wear and tear initially on him. So I think that's a positive from that standpoint. And just real quickly, what I wanted to say about the division, see, that's why when I hear fans talk about, oh, you have a good draft, you'll close the gap. Hold on a minute. The three other teams are trying to improve also. They don't just say, oh, we won the division or we made the playoffs, we're content with our roster. So, of course, everyone around you is trying to get better simultaneously. This idea that the three other teams stay put and you just get better is living in fairy tale land.
Though sometimes good teams, because of the salary cap and such, do lose good players.
No,
they
sure.
might actually, like the Cowboys last year, lost a bunch of really good players, and they got worse.
Absolutely, but they also are bringing in young prospects, though, simultaneously with the other teams. That's basically what I'm getting at.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
All right, that's all we have. Plenty more to say about the draft, but we have all week to do it, so let's not waste any more time now. That's the time we have for Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, the Giants mobile app. It's all brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk, coming to you from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. We'll be back again tomorrow at 12:30. We hope to have Charlie Weiss, Sr., the father of Charlie Weiss Jr., who is the offensive coordinator for Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. We hope to have that cooking on tomorrow's show, and we'll see you then.